Welcome to DAO Deep Dives, where we interview DAO founders, core DAO contributors, and everyone else who works on the periphery of decentralized autonomous organizations.
So let's dive right in. Today we have Nick with us, who knows a lot more about public relations and marketing than certainly I do, and is working primarily in the Web3 space over the last many years and is a crypto OG, I would say. You've been in the space for quite a while, right? So I love to find you working in this space now full time. So welcome, Nick.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why are you working in this space and what do you do in this space?
I think Sven, the way we met is funny because you met me back when I had my restaurants in New Orleans, and in New Orleans there was a restaurant called Booty Street Food. We actually took Bitcoin as a payment method, and that was back in 2013. So I am now beyond into my 10th year into being in crypto and blockchain. And back then it was like we were selling lattes for Bitcoin. And it's very surprising to me because I never thought that like Bitcoin would ever be a store of value. I was always like on the payments camp, like as a small business, you're paying 2-3% to credit card processors. And so Bitcoin being about 0.5% of the transaction was like, oh, I could be a profitable restaurant finally if I sell Bitcoin. Yeah, I've been in it for a long time and I've been a believer in it and the power of blockchain specifically, maybe less so in the power of overpriced JPEGs to change the world, but the power of this immutable ownership and being able to transact on the blockchain has always been something I thought was really appealing. Also cutting out middlemen, right? The little shit in me, the one who always wants to poke and prod. I'm a little brother to three. So like that, I think that instinct always was strong in me. So lo and behold, I finally came to work in this space too.
That's awesome. So why we brought you on, actually, just to give our listeners a little bit more context to, you work with very cool names in the space, not necessarily 100% specific for DAOs. We're DAO Deep Dives, of course, but you just mentioned something before we went on air that these principles apply not just for specific niches or specific industries. And we'll let you talk about this a little bit more, but some super interesting projects a lot of people might be familiar with. You worked with Steve Aoki, Avenged Sevenfold on their NFT projects, as well as, I think, Sandbox, right, with Sandbox. So tell us a little bit about that experience and how has it been working with these very recognizable names?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because you end up having similar problems. When I used to do hospitality and travel technology, you end up with similar communications problems across all these different types of projects. And some have various levels of decentralization, and some just call themselves DAOs, but aren't actually DAOs. And some are DAOs, and they've decided to like remove that word completely from their vernacular. So I find it's pretty interesting depending on where you're working or what type of entity you're working with. Sandbox, which is working progressively towards more decentralization, or you have Steve Aoki. When we launched the Aokiverse, it's not a DAO, but I mean has similar structures of that. And so I think it also has made me think a lot about what DAOs actually mean to people. And DAOs more as a moniker for structure rather than maybe a philosophy of life is something I'm starting to realize that maybe we don't talk enough about, where it's what is a DAO and is it just a structure or is it a philosophy? And then that has to inform all of your communication strategies. And a lot of times we forget that part. We just call it a DAO and then call it a day. You think that's it. But once you put DAO in the name, you're inherently going to have a certain type of person that's going to be interested. And I have an LLC. I don't go around saying that I run Ghostworks Communications LLC all the time, right? It's not what people want to hear necessarily because it sounds corporate and boring. And DAOs kind of sound scammy and insane to a lot of people. And we don't really talk a lot about that. We're so bought into this like little niche of the internet that sometimes we forget that we have to think bigger and decide who we want to be in our organizations and why, and then go out and get them with our messaging and not just expect them to come to us because they want decentralization, which is just, I believe, not something many people want. No one goes around and sits at dinner tables and talks about decentralization. It's not a frequent topic of conversation for the majority of the people, right? So we have to think about that when we're doing our brand strategies too.
Hey, speak for yourself. I am always talking about decentralization at dinner. No.
Probably a lot of people do who are listening to this, right? That's the whole point. But ultimately, like you're going to be at the dinner with the same 12 people for the next 20 years of your life. And God help that you love these people, but otherwise those are your people for the rest of your life. So either love them and live with them forever or open it up, right?
Yep.
Try to make it a little better for others.
Totally. So would you say that Web3 in general, not just DAOs, has a branding problem? And then just to add on to that a little bit, what are the pros and cons that you've found, or even the most exciting points about marketing in this space specifically?
Yeah, the PR problem, that's the brand problem. I think so that's what we ended up talking a lot about. It's what is the rebrand, right? Like at some point we can't keep changing it, right? You can't, that's super scammy behavior too, right? You move towns, you change your name, you take your kids with you, you're now a carpenter or something like that. We can't keep just changing the name and not changing the practices. But I do think that I think we moved too fast to Web3. Like we overshot and we have all these promises and all these things that weren't possible yet. And I wish we would have just destroyed crypto first and then introduced Web3 right about now because it is the perfect moniker for what we're trying to accomplish. But unfortunately, we got exuberant and now we are stuck with this bag that we have to get onto. So I think for me, it's fundamentally about choosing the right things to focus on. Like I was saying, like I just don't think that the majority of people care about decentralization. Digital ownership, I do not think is a priority for the majority of humans. And immutability and censorship, most definitely not a thing that most people worry about. So, with that said, that doesn't mean we get rid of those. It's just we need to talk about the things people care about. Like you make smoothies with vegetables because people need to eat their smoothie. I mean, eat their vegetables, right? Like it's a format issue, but people still need the vegetables. We just have to figure out how we get it in. And to me, it's talking about the stuff that people like. They want simplicity, convenience, and fun or novelty. So if we're not scratching, I always say two or three of those itches, like it has to be simple, convenient, and fun. That's the win overall. Then it's just never going to be a mainstream thing. And of course, that could be fine. I don't know. Like maybe things don't need to be mainstream. But if we're looking at like digital identity and voting on the blockchain, and we're looking at trying to take some of the power back from government, we need a ton of freaking people for that. So I don't think it's going to work if it's complicated, really annoying, and super not fun. I still sometimes struggle. Like even some of these mints in the past that I missed, Meebits, World of Women, it was just such a pain for me to deal with it. Like even today with my ledger, I'm just like, it's just a slog, and until we fix that, I don't know. That's the branding problem, maybe more so is like that interface issue too. So
For me, it's a matter of understanding certain mints and needing to have kind of a hot wallet specifically for these types of scenarios where you immediately transfer over to your cold wallet, because dealing with Trezors and ledgers have been such a challenge when it comes to integrating with your MetaMask. And then with what I've just quick pointer for anybody that's like, this is resonating with them that's listening. Like I've had an incredible time with Rabby, the wallet, RABY, and it essentially just consumes your MetaMask and is just a much more pleasant experience, even when dealing with a Ledger or Trezor, because you can plug it in and then review all of your accounts by page, and you can see the balances that are on any chain. And that's just
I
been
love
a
that.
huge plus.
Well, I need the AI is what I want. I just want to be able to open up a thing and say, buy this NFT from this wallet and have it done for me.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to change everything. And we just have to figure out the security for it. I know everyone's going to be like, blah, 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 blah. That's the whole point. We don't want to do that,
Yeah.
but we got to figure that out securely. And I think Ledger's probably those types of hardware wallets, perhaps. But would that be cool?
Totally.
You could just go in and be like, buy this NFT from this wallet, and then I can move on with my day. It'd be faster than buying anything else, too, right? Like more than getting a shirt from the store.
Yeah, it should be a seamless experience,
Yeah.
and I don't need to know which chain this is on. Going back to DAOs, since that's basically what we talk about here, is a good question that we like to ask all of our guests is, what is a DAO? Not the definition, but from your own perspective. I know you're looking to work with DAOs and have been in this space for long enough to really understand the value proposition though. And what are they to you, and how do you plan on working with them?
To me, I might be caveat of unpopular opinion guy over here, but to me, a DAO is like an impossibility. I actually personally don't believe that DAOs can even be possible, just because I do not think you can have a decentralized autonomous organ. Like the three words decentralized autonomous organization to me was a misnomer to begin with, because it's just can't happen. Like you can't have an organization that's autonomous. It's not how it works, man. You know what I mean? There has to be something. Like we all have a heart in our body, right? Like the system has to work together, and I just don't think it can be on its own. So for me, I struggle with that because I want like them to be what they are, which are groups of people doing cool shit and organizing themselves in a way that suits them best for that individual group of people. That's the way I feel about it. It is literally just a structure for humans to try to get things done. in a different format than we had before. And I think it's a better format personally because it puts the community first. And to me, that's Web3 also versus like Web2 and stakeholders and profit and all that types of stuff. So for working when it work comes to working with DAOs, I think that's a key piece is like just understanding what is it that you're selling. Are you selling a DAO, which can totally be people love DAOs, right? Like you can sell that too, but are you selling like a purpose more? And then talk less about it being a DAO then because the DAO is a structure. Again, like I don't go to my coffee shop and have a meetup for people who have LLCs because that's crazy. Like who cares about an LLC, right? No one. Like you care about your money, your taxes, and that's it. But yet, meanwhile, in Web3, we do we have podcasts about it. Rick, can you imagine if this was LLC Deep Dives podcast? Y'all, that's just not a thing. No one wants that except for maybe some lawyers.
I think on the last interview, actually, we were wondering if at the beginning of LLCs, they were quite revolutionary, right? If they were people, nerds like us, so excited that they would have done a podcast if podcasts were such a thing at the time.
Yeah, or if some guy got sued because like they put some sort of liability, like whatever the structure was that was in beforehand, right? There's people who had that experience of it. But you know what it says to me though is that like it's captured something that we need. So I'm not hating on it by any means. Look, anything that captures human attention is interesting to me as a brand strategy person, right? Like I don't care what it is. I'm just like, cool. Like people care about this because ultimately, like when I work with my startups, especially, no one cares is my number one first thing I always tell people because you're busy working in your thing, you're busy doing every day. You think what you're doing is the best thing ever because you're devoting your life to it. But unfortunately, it's so sad, but no one gives a shit. And you have to cut through that. And that's the hardest part about PR and brand marketing. But when you have something that people are caring about, that's like such an interesting piece. And it just maybe goes to show more about what DAOs aren't. Maybe it's more about all the other stuff that's going on that we don't like. We're not feeling like the value is being accrued to the few. We're not feeling like there's more distributed opportunity. We're feeling like there's actually like a potential to gain something and also just build something with passionate people rather than take a job that we hate just because it pays the bills, right? So there's all those things. I think so what DAOs aren't should be those types of things. But sometimes DAOs become like that too, right? Like they become like slogs and you have all these bounties and then you have maybe like you're not being paid as much as market rates because now the workforce is global. It's like a very pure globalization kind of situation. So it's interesting as far as what DAOs aren't and are.
You said a couple of things I want to focus on a little more. Community first, right? What does this mean from a marketing perspective? How do you do that? And how do you, first of all, grow your community, but then also keep them engaged?
Yeah, no, it's a good point for all of us. We have to think about this. And to me, it's community first is a very nice kind of like moniker, right? But how it's really brand first for me. I'm a brand guy. Like I do all my communications in service of brand. I'm really more of a brand strategy believer rather than just a communication specialist because to me, the brand is the only thing that's left now, right? Everything is commodified. NFTs got commodified so probably the fastest out of anything we've ever created in human history, thanks to Blur. Like we were going along nice, and then all of a sudden, everything is commodified in the NFT space because now you can buy 10 NFTs at once, like they're soybeans, right? We're basically trading bushels of soybeans with each other. And so what Blur has done is create a good business for themselves, right? They have a great brand, but what that leaves on the backside is an empty space. And if you don't have a good brand, you just get sucked into the vacuum of that empty space, right? Like the NFT projects that don't have a strong brand. Now they're just commodities coming up and down. If you can get them priced to move 3 or 4%, you're doing it like 50K, 100K volume a day, like you're making bank. You are paying bills and having a lot of money. But for the rest of us, it's got to be a great brand because the brand is what you stand for and it attracts the right people. And I think for DAOs especially, you got to attract the right people because I always want to be more involved in the DAOs that I do tend to join, but work gets in the way or you have these other things. And so finding those core contributors and getting them to stick around requires a mission, vision, and all of that emanates from the brand. So if you don't know what you stand for, like you can't expect anyone to stand with you. And that's the key piece. And I think we forget that sometimes because someone thinks they've got a DAO and we have some Web3 people and that's enough. But we're busy, attention is hard to get. So start with the brand. And then from there, we can start determining exactly like what we want to do with the messaging and the community outreach and getting the right moderators in place and understanding what moves the needle because every group of people is different and DAOs can change so fast. I think you guys know this too, right? Like in 2 weeks, you could have 4 new contributors who are there every day, and all of a sudden the vibe is going this way. And without a strong brand structure, you have an issue because now you have a small minority that can pull things to their liking. And that's one of the biggest disadvantages of decentralization is that you actually have a centralization problem. And a small group of people can actually become the majority and change things, right? The 50% type attack. And that doesn't exist much elsewhere unless you're in succession and you're on a board and you're playing with billions of dollars. And that's super unique. But if you have a strong brand, usually requires or usually attracts the right people and they can protect it a little bit. And I would like to see more like centralized mechanisms in place around like brand protection and like mission and values and things like that. Because at some point, like someone's got to determine this stuff. And it would be good to have some structure for that. Like typically we do this, we do that. This is what we like to do. This is what we don't stand for. These are the behavior, these are the rules beyond like Discord, rules, but like really trying to make that culture up front. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
So I want to use an example, and that's Nouns DAO. So Nouns DAO has a fantastic brand, right? Certainly has proven itself. However, arguably, what did they want to accomplish in the beginning wasn't super clear, right? I think if I would have to say it in one sentence, it's probably something like Nouns DAO exists to further the Nouns ecosystem. I think
Proliferation of nouns. That's
Right.
literally their goal.
But now this makes sense. But when you start this, it does not. Talk to us about how you think Nouns did such a fantastic job in growing their community and beyond.
I love talking about nouns. Nouns is my favorite crypto Web3, whatever we want to call it, project, mostly for that exact reason that you pointed out, because it's just amazing what they accomplished. And I think there's one core reason that we always forget, especially with clients who always look at the neighbor or the other project, like, why can't we be like this? Why can't we be like that? So Nouns is lightning in a bottle. Yuga Labs, lightning in a bottle. Like these are not the right barometers for anyone to be comparing themselves to. That's like for the sandbox. Oftentimes we'll get people comparing us to Roblox, whatever they're 14 years in, 12 years in. It's like you can't compare Roblox at 12 years to Sandbox. It's like it's weird comparison. It's not fair. And I feel the same way when someone's like, why can't we be like Nouns? Look at Yuga Labs did Dookie Dash. Like we got to do that. And so I think some of these just had a unique structure, the timing of it, most especially because of the treasury. Like imagine Nouns now, right, trying to launch, and even Lil Nouns, right? There's a reason why Lil Nouns isn't a blue chip in that way. But when you're selling that many ETHs for every single day, it's an amazing resource. And that has fed into itself. So I think they were basically a virus. That's their mission statement, right? What is the mission statement of a virus? To proliferate the virus, right? So they just basically baked it in. And that is the most genius mission ever because it's just, we're going to give you money to put nouns everywhere. Now go be creative. And I think that's the best thing ever because of the creativity. Sure, they sponsor stuff and they do all that, but it's not like you're seeing nouns like go way too fast, too far. I'm sure it's already starting to get there. Like when I look through the prop house and you're like, the t-shirt's here and this, and it's just starting to become like, is it too much? Is it much proliferation? But it's also embedded a huge cultural ecosystem of people who love each other and love to support each other and have built that together.
All right, let's talk about PR strategies for DAOs or for Web3 projects. And if I'm like a small project looking to hire you, perhaps, you said that some of these other examples were lightning in a bottle. And I'm sure you get approached like, how do we replicate this? But is there like a kind of plan of action that you might start with for a smaller project looking to break out?
Generally, like my first thing when I start working with a client is just understanding what do you stand for? Like I was saying earlier, like what is it that we stand for? Who do we have as our not our competitive set, but like our dream set? Tell me 2 or 3 companies out there, 2 or 3 projects that you love, because that tells me the most about where you are, what you want to do. So by looking at that, I can determine things around like cadence of communications, quality of communications, types of communications, and then the all important vibe, which is, we all know this in Web3, but it's also just everywhere. Like vibe is, we know it when you see it. And so like when I can see something that they really admire or that they want to be, that's helpful. And sometimes it's even helpful because I'm just like, really? Like, I don't see it. Like, are you just like looking at the popular kid in the cafeteria and like wanting to be that because they're popular and you're not? So I also try to help them be realistic and understand like why they may have picked a project that doesn't quite make sense to me. And then from there, we make a strategy. We look at where you want to be short term, near term, or midterm, and then long term. And we start actually having a multi channel strategy across your earned media, your social media, your blogs, your mirror, all those different types of pieces. And then your earned media too, as far as PR. Not much paid media going on in Web3, which is interesting. You can, of course, pay the shills or get on the Twitter spaces, but really trying to focus on those first two pieces. And then once we know the strategy, we can start determining like the individual channels and who should be there. Because in the Web2 space, everyone wants to be on TechCrunch, right? And then you ask why, and you're like, because like everyone reads TechCrunch, I want to be on it. And usually never works out. If you get a client on TechCrunch, their phone doesn't all of a sudden start ringing. It's not like there's 5,000 people, your business didn't shift overnight. So it's similar in Web3, except the huge part about Web3 is there are so many more channels, right? Not platforms, that's basically Twitter and Discord, but there are so many individual contributors and creators and voices in the space that it's much more like a World War One hand-to-hand combat than it is World War Two, where you can, and even today, where you can just fly by night and drop things off like you could with Facebook ads or some of those other growth tactics. So you have to be much more strategic on choosing the channel.
So building up these brand strategies and thinking about which channels work for your organization is super important, it seems. Is that the same or similar, or where are the differences if you think through that for DAO specifically?
The DAO system, kind of the ecosystem, has its unique challenges, especially around contributors, because that's something that looking for someone to buy your product or become a consumer of your product is going to be very different than having actual contributors. Like we need you to not just be a stan or support the ecosystem, but we really have these onboarding ramps to get you in to help us out and help build it. So that is a little bit different because you're asking for more of a commitment. And that's something where it comes to just even the name DAO. And when I, even as myself, like just as a consumer out in the world, whenever I see a DAO, I'm automatically assuming there's going to be those on ramps, that there might be like requests or needs, or that it inherently suggests more work just to join, right? Even though that's not the case, you don't have to contribute. You can just be there passively or just jam your way through it, whatever. So that does add a lot of complexity because you're not just asking people to do that one transactional thing or multiple transactional things. Like with Avenged Sevenfold, for instance, we launched the Deathbats Club, and now with the world tour going on, those folks can get access on Ticketmaster to ticket allotment prior to other people. So that's still transactional, right? They don't have to come in and do fan art in order to get a bounty, right? They can contribute if they want, but it's more low key. Whereas like a DAO that is going to be relying on the contributors to move the business forward, you really need to focus on that mission, right? Because with a band or a Stevie Aoki, the mission is the dude, right? The person, the girl, the band, whatever the thing is, that passion, that creator is the driver, like to be close to that person. But when it comes to that DAO, you need to make sure that your mission is clear. And then most importantly, that the people who are the core contributors, the core team, never ever drift. I think that's the DAO conundrum, right? Because like corporations, you expect them to drift from mission driven stuff, right? If it is even a benefit corporation, it's not, I don't know, surprising if someone fails at being the best corporate steward in their brand. But with a DAO, it's so tricky because if one of your people goes off the rails, it can ruin the whole thing. We saw that a little bit with ENS. They managed to make it through. Like there was that moment where he mentioned a little bit just like off color comments on Twitter, and I'm gay. And so there's certain things where like people do stuff and it's a little bit like cringy and it pushes a certain type of person away because you just no longer can trust if the organization has your best interest in mind. And so you have to be very careful because you have much more of a person risk in a DAO than you would at a company, because most companies have multiple people associated with them. Not everybody, obviously, right? Like Elon Musk and all that, but it's just different in a DAO.
I've been in a couple of communities, actually, one of which was pretty serious project, and the core team fell apart, right? Because it was a hodgepodge of people who have, some of them never even met in person before, which is not necessarily a recipe for disaster. But in that case, we weren't as aligned as we thought we were. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in community calls and different factions of the core team pull in different directions. And then as a potential contributor or potential interested person in the DAO, no surprise that turns you off, right? So I love that you're highlighting the core team.
And the drama can be like an issue for the communications and branding. So if we have a drama moment, and one of the issues that DAOs often face is like crisis communications. And because they're nascent, and also because I think a lot of the folks in this ecosystem maybe haven't had businesses before, and this is literally they're learning as they go, they don't have crisis communications plans either, right? Because they barely have a brand strategy. So like, why would they have a crisis communications plan, which can be more sophisticated? But Fortunately, in Web3, your crisis plan needs to be up there closer to your brand strategy because it is a fraught space, right? We have scams, we have lots of issues, we have a lot of bad actors, it attracts all those pieces. And you have this person where projects become associated more with a person. And in Web3, we follow people mostly more than brands. If you look at all the handles of brands versus the people that run them, most of the time it's the people that everyone's following. And then the brand handles are a little less of a thing that people want to hear. So you got to make a plan for that. And DNS giving a structure for people to voice their displeasure or to have the governance, right? Which is the beauty of this. It's just that no one votes. You also have that issue to deal with too, that if something bad goes on, but it's only the core 20 to 30% voting on it, then what does that mean later when a new person comes in and realizes that like the core minority voted against something they believe in that was against the mission that they perceive in the DAO? So it's pretty risky. A lot of little landmines everywhere.
Speaking of strategy, what are your thoughts on like airdrops as a outreach strategy?
We don't do too many airdrops, so I try not to touch them much. But personally, no, I would never even, it's never an awareness strategy that works with me. But those are only the less formal ones that don't get a lot of press. So taking that type of airdrop where you just like give things to people, right? And a lot of times people are in like 20 different DAOs or they have different tokens and maybe they don't even realize they got an airdrop benefit to them, right? So there's a little bit of a structural problem with airdrops on the messaging side because unless you have a core mechanism to get the awareness out among the group that's getting the airdrop, that can be a huge issue. So I'll go back to Event Sevenfold. Last year, we had a Pop Wonder artwork that was airdropped to everybody that could be burned for the tour, which is just going on sale right now. So we're starting to see how many people are actually going to burn the token or burn the art for the tickets, which would be a great stat to have. But if you're just a busy person, you may not even know you have that in your wallet, right? And so communications wise, it's a huge issue. So I try to recommend only like those types of mechanics to people who have a very strong communications ability, right? Like it's a good engagement in Discord, or they also have been collecting emails, just or building at least a marketing campaign around it and not just assuming people check their wallets and have the time to check Discord. It's like on that. Of course, there's like the bigger L2s, these types of folks, the Blurs, the Arbitrums. People are going to hear about it through the media because there's so much money at play. And so that can also squeeze out some of the cooler airdrops that make a lot of sense because it's just not as sexy as like millions of dollars being made overnight.
This is a really interesting point where I've seen like in headlines that millennials and younger generations want experiences over possessions. And so here you have a perfect example where they have a possession and they have the opportunity for the experience instead. And you really get to see what those numbers boil down to be.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's a little bit of both, right? The experience of burning it, or that's the best part to me about Web3 is that we're digital IRL connection to me is just like the sweet spot, right? It's figuring out ways that can not just be digital, not just be virtual, but like how can the sandbox exist in the real world? And then burning mechanisms are super fascinating because we have mint parties, but we don't have burn parties. I'm a burner, so Burning Man has been a long time with me. So burning is maybe more top of mind. But the idea of doing these things in person makes experiences out of a digital asset. And I think we got to be more creative about that because DAOs have stickiness, right? You don't need a million people in a DAO to be a successful DAO, like a consumer, like Blur or something needs transactions. But what are the things you can do as a DAO with your airdrop that maybe isn't just here's a cool token from XYZ artist? Like physical merch is great. That's another thing Avenge is doing, like sending merch to different token holders. I know which token you had a different like gift bag, gift box that they created. I love that kind of stuff. It's surprise and delight at scale.
Yeah, I love the connection IRL to the digital world. I think that is super hard to do as a smaller project as well. So I think a lot of the examples we're bringing up here are they already have an audience. They're just deploying kind of these new fun technologies to make their audience's experience better or augmented in any way. For newer projects, how do you replicate an IRL vibe you might be able to create relatively easily by just whatever the fun nature of your project is? How do you do that online? And I'll give you an example, right? We started Name DAO at ETH Denver, which is a very silly project as well, similar to Nouns. And people loved it in person. Actually, the reaction usually was like, this is a stupid idea. The first pitch they heard, that was almost always the answer. Then they listened for a couple of minutes and they're like, okay, I see it. It's fun. Let's see where this goes. That's easy, right? Like if you talk to someone for 10 minutes over a coffee, you can get there relatively quickly. But how do you replicate this feeling you can create on a human level in a scalable way online? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, you might be asking for an impossibility there. Like scalable and intimacy, it's like always a little bit of it can be difficult, right? So I think it's just about finding the right touch points. And it can be difficult, I know, as a small project because you see all these cool ideas, like that costs money or this costs that, or feeling so like resource constrained and having that feeling rather than like abundance, right? It's always so tough sometimes to get into that abundance mindset. So I always try to find the sweet, like look where there is abundance happening in your community and try to lean into it while still being true to the brand core. That's the key piece, right? Because if you're a music project and everyone's talking on the film channel, but no one's on the music channel, you need to either do some soul searching or you need to go get the right people in there, or you just pivot to a film project because clearly everyone likes film in this Discord, right? And so it's like finding those abundance areas and then determining what that means. So looking for those easy, low friction places. So let's say in this example that everyone's in the film channel, but you're a music project. Okay, cool. So they like film. Film has music. Okay, so maybe we should do like a score contest where we work with a student organization to build film soundtracks, right? And just trying to find the ways that allow you to fulfill that core mission in those like low friction areas. That's what I always try to encourage. And then understanding also that it's easy for us to get obsessed with likes and counts and views and minutes spent and all that. But ultimately, it's the 100 to 1,000 true fans will always, I think, is like probably the sagest wisdom ever said about most things. And so if you can get 100 people together for a small event around NFT NYC that's already co-located with people and provide that intimate access that's not some giant DJ throwdown where you can't hear the person next to you anyway. So it's like you're fun, but you're maybe want something else out of it. I think that's like the win is like what are those spaces that you can use, and then also going into collaborations. I think we all have seen the power of collaborations, maybe to a detriment now because there's just so many collaborations, right? Like XYZ this, XYZ that, and you want to make sure that they're strategic and thoughtful so that when you are throwing these events, you get the right people in place.
Yeah, that's very true words these days. So you talked about engaging the 100 most active people in your Discord, right? So you have a community or you're building it, and maybe you're not at 100 yet. Maybe you're at 20 and 5 of them are the core and the 20 find it interesting. So how do you get to 100? And then more importantly, how do you make sure you're actually attracting contributors versus speculators?
Yeah, these are all like super core, really important questions. And I think we have to remember that part of this is this hand-to-hand combat thing where it's like it used to be if you found product market fit, you could just start dropping money into social media ads and build your company from there. But that's not really going to work in this type of context. And so the power of one-to-one outreach cannot be overstated, right? And spending the time, the dedicated time in the early days to go out strategically, thoughtfully, and very time intensively, reaching out individually to people that you want to participate. And like you guys, like this model is a great model. It's not easy, but launching a podcast that's also can be a way to build community, really finding those opportunities, and less so going on a bunch of podcasts. Like, sure, you can go up on Twitter Spaces, and that's a good way to build visibility and all that, but nothing ever replaces a direct outreach with a very thoughtful thing. Not, hey, dude, can you give me some of your non-existent time to do my project with me? That's not going to work. But a strategic, I heard you say this on this podcast, this in this article, and you're doing this. And I think this means something to you because of XYZ, and here's all the things we can do. I think that's amazing and probably very underused, where it's like you go out to these core people and build them one by one so that you don't have to do this 100 times. You really only need to do this 10, 20 times. And if you get to 5 to 10 yeses or 5 to 10 next convos, those people will then start seeding those next conversations. And whether they become contributors or they just introduce you to the next person, you're just building your vibe, like a membership club. That's like traditionally, how it's done. You pick your top first 50 people, everybody gets one invite, and then it starts to perpetuate itself like that, aka nouns, right? Because that's one of the genius things about nouns. It solves the cold start problem, but it also solves the, oh no, now we have 10,000 people in our DAO because we sold 10,000 NFTs, and now who the heck are these people problem? So figuring out that mechanism, just like Nouns did, and they have this as open source, but figuring out this mechanism to like strategically and thoughtfully build your community and not just expecting people to show up because, again, going back to it, no one cares, right? Just no one cares. And so you got to give them a reason to care, have a mission that resonates, and then get that mission into their mindset, get that in front of them. And then just you got to beat them over the head. At least people got to see stuff like 7 times before they remember it, or some sad figure of old brand data. But you just got to keep going.
Yeah, I think you're right. The seven times, and it leaves its mark permanently. We were able to recall that memory at some point. One of the most fascinating projects I think that just crushed and came onto the scene really quickly in a very interesting way. It was like we're in the middle of the downturn, the bear market is upon us, nothing is selling out the way it was, things are looking grim. And all of a sudden, just there was Twitter spaces left and right. And anytime you joined them, people were coming up to speak and they were just mumbling and making all these random noises. Then anybody that was like there on crypto Twitter in that moment knows what I'm talking about. Goblin Town just took over and it was a very successful project, at least in terms of their ability to sell that project. I haven't seen what they're doing these days, but it was a very exciting thing. And people that weren't even involved whatsoever wanted to pretend they were involved just by getting into spaces and reenacting what they were doing. I thought that was pretty brilliant. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the silliness works in a lot of ways, right? Because it's memorable. And I think just again, you got to give something for people to remember because again, no one cares, right? So but now you can make them care with this type of thing, which I think is super clever. But it also like underpins one of the biggest risks in Web3, which we continue to see, which is the hype issue, the hype problem. If you want to build a hype project, hype is a drug, hype is addictive, and a hype is what you will be stuck with because it's really hard to change a project from a hype project to a substance project. It's also really difficult to launch a substance project in our current environment where hype drives everything and narrative pushes everything. And I get that tension is really difficult for a lot of my clients and a lot of people that I talk to. It's hard because you need a little hype to push things forward. But if you're not careful, you end up with like Poopy, where it's just all he's trying to say is that we are a media company, not an NFT project. NFTs are like Netflix. NFTs are, it's like a potential channel. It's a tool. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to sell. It's a product line. And you end up with a giant vociferous people after you. So it's difficult to walk that line. I oftentimes feel like people push too far to hype without realizing that they're getting addicted to something that they're going to have to keep going because you can't stop hype once you hype. Like if you want all the hype boys showing up, they're going to want hype, and that's your customer.
Yeah, the perfect example with Doodles, right? They're not an NFT company. That's not what they were saying, and everybody took it so seriously right away. It just exploded into this negative thing. That PR, perfect example of how not to do that, I guess.
It's we're so sensitive in Web3. It's just so funny to me. It's like Mean Girls. It's like like I said, I'm a gay dude, so it's super funny to me to see a bunch of straight boys acting like that. It makes me laugh because I was like, wow, you guys are worse than any of my friends. I don't understand it. Is it that you have nothing else to do? I don't get it, especially when someone's just trying to have what I think is like trigger a very thoughtful conversation about what is the role of a blue chip NFT project or blue chip brand. And why are we hating on people that want to go mainstream? Harkening back to what we talked about before, it does become a little bit of a challenge, but understanding what you want to do and where you come from is super key. And Doodles has always said exactly what they want to do. So yeah, that was a little weird. But going back to the smaller organizations, you don't have the luxury of being a Doodles who can say whatever they want mostly and have your core group, but just have to be very careful, know what you stand for, and just have that litmus test because the right mission and the right brand should answer the question for you. So if you have a really strong mission statement, you should be able to answer every single business question with the mission statement and the words, does this help us accomplish this? And then you have the statement. You could put it up on a board with everybody. If it's either a yes or a no, there's no way to have a maybe because a maybe is a no. So that's for small organizations. Get that mission statement, take time. It's worth the investment. And then make sure every decision goes through the lens of that mission statement because ultimately you'll find the best people for your DAO.
So an interesting path we almost started going down on here, and I want to go down that way, is what are the worst PR strategies or stunts you've seen that failed in a very public way? And let's dissect them a little bit. Maybe what should we not do and why?
Yeah, that is a good one. That's a tough one. Let's see. It's always tricky because you don't want to call anybody out. You want to be like super careful on some of those things.
No, call him out. Call
Oh
him out.
man.
So then there's customers come to you
Yeah,
next
then they
time.
come here out. Yeah. We saw, let's go with one that like a lot of people have talked about. In full disclosure, I have worked with Lamborghini in the past too, but the Porsche drop, which in my opinion got maybe a little unfairly pushed. It was one of those situations too where I'm sometimes shocked at how like quick the backlash can be. Because what I loved about it at first was the during NFT Now's portal or the gateway, you went in and they had the little experience. And there was an artist doing I think the hood of a 911 was like painting it live, and then you had an IYK and you redeemed it and you got a little car. Still keep it. You got a little die cast a Porsche 911. I thought it was super cool because I'm a car guy, and I was like, that's awesome. It's a little takeaway. It's a memento. You can put it up. You'll always see it in your house, right? The IRL digital thing is, again, I love this. And then I thought it was a cool way to start your allow list. And then I think getting caught up a little bit in the Web3 like community building moment, you have to be careful of like, how quick are you going to launch is another big question I often work with clients. Of, do you wait till Discord is a certain number? Is there a sweet spot? Do you just launch and then build it as you go just because you want to get it out there? But I think when a big brand comes in and then the price point seems off, it's hard to say where these things come from because I'm just like, it's a Porsche. You buy 1.5 ETH, like, I don't know, just that doesn't seem that expensive for someone who wants to be even just a Porsche fan. I get it. But I think it does become dangerous if you don't message it correctly. This is why it's like this. We're doing it not because this is an NFT for everybody. Maybe you don't say it like that. We're doing it because these are the different things you're going to get, and making that super clear, I think, was a lesson that I learned from that one. It's just making sure that we're very strong in understanding the value that we're offering people. And sometimes it's okay just to be like, it's a digital collectible. This is for our great big fans, like Avenged. Avenged is never, the Death Pass Club is never going to be a 10K project. Like it could be, but it will have nothing to do with what Matt and the band want it to be. That is not at all the intention. The intention is it's an access token to a deeper fan experience, period. And if the market speculates on that's not what the point is, they just don't care about that. That's not really what they're trying to do. And so I think being super clear about that objective is really helpful, but it's also really hard to know what people are going to react to sometimes. That's the harder part with PR. And it goes back to knowing your core, having that mission,
Yeah.
and then maybe a crisis communications plan so that if things start, if the launch starts turning on you in Web3, you never really know. And trying to make sure that you have that plan in place, I think is super key.
Yeah, it sounds like that brand awareness, right? Knowing who you are as a brand or what your product is about is super key here. And I would agree with you that maybe a lot of people who complain might have in the real world never been a Porsche customer, right? I don't know. Was that a way to bring in new people? In a way, maybe, but yeah, know yourself. And I think that's a key problem for many DAOs as well, where we asked ourselves in a bunch of projects was involved in the past, what is the product? Is the community the product? Or is it simply the community which revolves around the product? Is there some other product? Right. So social DAOs, maybe the community is the product. Is it nouns or name DAO or things like that, where the sense of belonging to something and having a group which does cool stuff which you like, maybe for that the community is the product, and an NFT sale or whatever it might be is merely a way to fund fun stuff, right? The pizza.
But then you have to be careful though, because once you're saying community is the product, you're Facebook. And this is why this becomes so funny to me, because life is secular. You look at like where we're coming back to, and you're like, oh wait, everything in the 90s is like cool again. Or you just start seeing how everything ends up returning in on itself. And at some point where you're going to struggle with the similar ideas too, of what is the product, what are we offering, and how do we catalyze that community? Like Friends with Benefits, for instance, right? That is the whole point, that it's the membership, but it's the people you'll meet and what you'll do with it. But it turns out that that's not necessarily a business model. It's can be, but it's also something that's fraught with problems, because now are you going to charge brands for access to this community? If those are ads, are you going to start wall gardening? Oh, now we're in the same place we were before. And so you have to think about, I think, value more like broadly across the ecosystem. And something recently that came out talking about Web3, I think it was Seed Club, maybe it was just something about trying to clarify the fact that Web3 does have business models and trying to dispel some of those rumors. But then in the article, it's more about revenue streams. And we also don't have the best like business fundamentals sometimes, because like a business model and revenue streams aren't the same thing. A business model is how value is accrued through a whole ecosystem, and revenue streams are part of that, but there's other parts of it too. So a business model isn't necessarily how you make money. It's how your business creates value for the people that participate in that ecosystem. And that doesn't have to be money. And we equate revenue all too often with value. And unfortunately, Web3 doesn't create a lot of value. It does create revenue. And so in that context, we have a huge problem. But DAOs try to solve a lot for that, because the value, if you don't value it, like if you're not getting value out of it, you won't contribute. So it's a little clearer. It's not as transactional. And that's the thing I do love about DAOs. Like it does require a little bit of like faith and contribution so that there is actual value being brought to people, right? So like I could contribute to a DAO and never get paid and spend 10 hours a week doing it, but I'm happy as a clam. It's given me so much benefit and value and happiness that I don't want it. It's great. And even if someone's making money off that DAO, I feel fine because I'm happier. That's not a revenue stream, but that is a business model.
One thing I've seen, I have a lot of background, I think is fairly crossover with yours that we have in common, including like owning a cafe and accepting Bitcoin there much far back in the day. And also one thing I've done is event promotions and throwing concerts, being a talent buyer, organizing tours, things like that. With that being said, I guess this is a two-part question. The first is just like, how early or how soon will we see all these major ticketing platforms offering the NFT aspect by default? And then the second part of that is leave it up to artists and musicians and their creativity and their nature to push back on the status quo and maybe the system to build their own thing, right? And so how far are we away from DAOs that compete with some of these larger ticketing platforms?
The DAO is ticketing platform. I hadn't really occurred to me in that structure. Ticketmaster now has token gating because Matt from Avenged Sevenfold pushed for this, because this is what we're doing. We have this thing. You need to do it. And the whole point really is, of course, to reward fans, the best fans, the most engaged fans. But on that flip side is to avoid this kind of reseller mess. And what's been happening on Ticketmaster because of the cure is that now people are selling Ticketmaster accounts, like full accounts that have been like aged. They're called aged Ticketmaster accounts, like they're stakes. And they go for $50 to $100 a pop. And people are selling entire accounts in order to resell tickets. So it's amazing for circumventing all these things. But a DAO in that type of situation is interesting. Is there a way that a DAO can solve some of these reseller problems where, I don't know, what does that start looking like and how do artists benefit from it? We don't have an artist-owned ticketing platform. We don't have some of those things. And that could change a lot of that conversation.
Let's talk about building a vibrant community. What do you think the approach is, or what should be the initial approach? Is it online events? Is it physical events? How should maybe a DAO or a smaller project or even a larger project really approach? What do they think about first?
It's such a difficult question. I struggle with my clients too. A lot of times we do like the movie nights in Discord or the game nights and some of these trying things. And for me, there's just no way in hell I'm going to go watch like a movie night on Discord. It's just not for me. I don't know. But I was also the guy during the pandemic that had 3 dance floors in his house, like that I would run through all the different live streams on Discord with all my favorite DJs and people, right? Like I loved that so much. And that doesn't exist anymore because you can't do that, right? The DJs are touring now. No one's at home doing that stuff anymore. So it has diminished my ability to do that. But I used to hate virtual events before that. And then I saw like the point of it. So I think it's about balancing the needs of the community and figuring out what you need to accomplish. I think it's also being super careful not just to do an IRL event because you think you need to do, oh, if I don't do an event at NFT NYC, no one knows who I am, which is a valid thought. And there may be some truth to it, but there's no way someone joins a DAO because they're just like, they're cool. Like they were NFT NYC. I'm pretty sure that's not how most people operate. But in the right context, an IRL event can be a watershed moment for a community because it's hard to care about people that you haven't seen in person. Like you can. I've had clients I've never met before for 3 or 4 years. I used to run an editorial team of almost 10. We barely saw each other. I think one person I managed for 3 years before I met her. And so it's possible, but I don't know. It doesn't give you the like connection feels of I'm going to spend my free time instead of hanging out with my kids and my friends on this DAO, building this DAO. And so I think that finding those touch points makes a lot of sense, but making sure it's not an ego play, making sure it has a strategic use and that you're doing it for the right point, and the point isn't just to make you feel better or feel cool at NFT NYC, because honestly, taking everyone, like the core contributors of 5 people upstate to do a massage retreat for 2 days where you can like catalyze and build strategy for the whole year is probably going to be way better use of your money than spending 50K on some dumb party of 1,000 parties. But people don't get that, right? Because they see the flash, they see this other stuff, they see what the big boys are doing, and they want to play in that playground, but it oftentimes isn't the right play.
This is events and culture and community very close together. One of my favorite DAOs which has done this well is Orange DAO. Orange DAO is a DAO which I like personally because, of my affinity to venture DAOs and startup funding. And they also started at the right time. Let's be honest. That was before shit hit the fan so massively. That helped, I'm sure. But also they really leaned into community building and creating culture. And then they charted a yacht, I think, or something crazy, right? Like right away. Having money helps.
Yep.
In that
Certainly
instant.
does.
But I think the people, like, that's why a big reason why they had traction pretty quickly, right? Because it found the people who wanted that vibe and they encouraged it. Again, how do you do that on a shoestring budget? Might be a little bit more tricky. But I like to think that bringing it back to the beginning, like knowing who the people are, which would make your community better and foster the culture, I think is who you need to reach out to. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. And then the collaborations come back into play too in these types of situations, figuring out like that those shared affinities can really be helpful when cross-exposing different groups and like finding joint contributors that might be wanting to spread the love around. And also just rewarding your people is also one of the best parts about it. Whether it's like a party or just like a offsite, you do need to give people a little bit of pressure release. Like you can't just expect people to do just a bunch of stuff and not want to have a little bit of goodies, some perks. Because honestly, that's always like the best part of corporate jobs. So it's like you got a few perks, maybe way less now than there used to be, right? No more kombucha bars or any of that shit. But there still is a value.
I thought you were talking about the golden watch after 50 years.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, we like overcompensated, right? You got one watch after 50 years and now you can have 50 gallons of kombucha every day delivered to your house or something. But there has to be like a medium area where it's like people like non-financial perks. And sometimes that's just a compliment. And sometimes it's some sort of gift. And it turns out the blockchain is perfect for that. Right? Like we can record all kinds of different stuff and we can actually like measure engagement and contribution in new and exciting ways. And that's where the sweet spot comes out.
Where do we go from here? We like to talk about what the future looks like with DAOs. Lots of the founders actually have a different perspective from you, and that is they're actively trying to change the world in some way by reinventing the structure of their industry. And I assume your answer will be quite different, but if we were to 10x from here, where do we go with DAOs? What does it look like in the future from your perspective?
I think it would be great. I think having these formal structures, legal structures that recognize this new way of forming organizations is important. I think that to me is like the fundamental piece, so that we need to have it be something where like when I'm deciding whether or not I want to do an LLC or not, I also have these other options to think about new ways to structure my business. And I think to me, that is like the most important near-term critical step to get us to where this is seen, not just as like a novelty, but actually as a realistic place to be. And then the tooling, there's so many DAO tooling products. It's funny for when you look at the total number of DAOs, I think, what was I sell 2,000 or something, maybe like functioning. And then there's 500 startups or something. I don't know. I can't remember what the stat was, but it was just we way over indexed in DAO tooling because everyone expected to become the new LLC. But we like forgot that we need the legal, like it needs to be legal or it's just going to be a DAO as an LLC. Then it's just, I don't know, like how do you reconcile that internally if you are an LLC with owners and a DAO? So I think if we get to the point where we're able to like showcase that this is a viable entity legally, that helps us at least dispel some of that hesitation. And then we can really dial into the models that work and what type of like how much centralization is enough centralization. Like I'm personally like a big fan of a core team that's on salary and that lives and dies by it, because you go to work if you have a salary, right? That's the whole point. And you can't just like peace out and disappear with half the treasury or just walk away. And so I think that's important. Like we need to have those incentives in place. And I think when you have those two pieces together, a little bit more centralization, but with an understanding that you got to accrue value to like all stakeholders, or at least majority of stakeholders and not just the few owners, that's just hugely transformative on its own.
Have you seen incentive models and compensation models play a big role in the marketing and the branding strategy so far?
When it comes to individual, like attracting and marketing for like individual folks, like trying to like upgrade what people perceived about the project or to get new people in, I think that does come into play. It's the whole win token type situation. But I think that those incentives are very quickly misaligned, which is not like what you want to be reading every 5 messages in your Discord in which you're trying to get real things done, right? And that's a very difficult position to be in. And so I'm more of a fan of that centralized model, which a very structured incentive system for like other contributors. For this is what like the bounty model I think can work pretty well. So it's like you're not just like waiting to get a token, hoping that if you did, just setting people up for misaligned expectations, right? But I submitted 50 articles and now you're telling me I only get 2 tokens. Like what the hell? And now they're pissed and all that. So I think it's important to make sure that you align the incentives with the point of the community and like what people want, because it's been proven time and again that just giving people money doesn't motivate them. You can look up countless studies that show that. There is, of course, a point up to which humans have more satisfaction. I think it was like 70K or something, but it's diminishing returns from there. And not everybody, like some people would just love to not work Fridays or love to work from 9 to 2 and still make the same amount. You need to have a human approach to it. And ironically, sometimes DAOs, I feel like, don't have as much of a one-to-one human kind of thing. It's just like a blanket, like this is what we do. We are more machine, but that's not going to work until the AI is doing everything, and that's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's a difficult line to walk. Yeah. With having an engineering background myself, and I could be quoted multiple times, I'm sure. I do believe in the machine in the middle approach, yep. But I'm not saying we're going to get it done by tomorrow. It's going to take a long time.
We've talked a lot about this, me and you know what I mean? Like where it's just, I know you're very much like, we can do it. I'm like, there's got to be like more nuance, but there also can't be nuance that can be interpreted as like favoritism, because now we're the same. It's really easy to tip back into, oh, actually, we're going to do favoritism to this group of people, or this type of brand or whatever it is, versus and at the disadvantage of others. And now we've just replicated the same bullshit that's been happening forever.
Yeah. I think we should strive to measure as much as we can and make decisions on data, right? This is how we build companies for many years now. And more will be better. That's what I believe in. Can you take the emotion out entirely? Probably not for every organization, but I think for many, it would be better sometimes to take it out and just not finding yourself in an argument. I think DAOs are getting there a lot quicker because it's this hodgepodge of people coming together, trying to do something, whatever it might be, sending someone to the moon. But do you really need to discuss if that spacesuit needs to be black or green?
Right.
I don't know. But some people, I guarantee you, will have strong opinions on it.
Yeah. And then it's who's the right opinion, right? Or who's the one who has the more authority, or like who, because straight democracy, just up or down votes is not always the best. And it maybe should be based on past contribution. My vote should outweigh, like even a democracy, like maybe it should outweigh it. I don't know. Like, what does that look like is a super difficult one, especially for like PR and brand though, because a lot of my work, like we'll be developing relationships or journalists get busy and they don't see a pitch, but then the next time they see it because they saw the email that they didn't respond, it's so hard to measure some of those black box things. Like just because we didn't land a good press for this pitch doesn't mean that like they all didn't engage with it and are primed for the next announcement, but now I look like I haven't done my job. So it's like there's this weird kind of middle ground that it's going to be difficult to get to.
Nick, you're a wealth of knowledge. We really appreciate having you on the show. Speaking of your work, how can people find you and what's the best way to get a hold of you and engage?
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter, like all of us plebes, at Worldly, so WORLDLI. And then you can email me anytime at nick@ghost.works. So nick@ghost.works.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And yeah, any last words you want to share?
Keep fighting the good fight. It's always so difficult when you're like a smaller project trying to come up. I know it's like I have a lot of empathy for my founder clients and things like that. And if you believe in it, give yourself like a good amount of time to work on it. And then if it's not working out, you just got to try something else and just keep going at it. It's really the best thing.
And that's a wrap. Sven and Solve are your hosts for DAO Deep Dives, a podcast about all things DAO. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.